Thank you all so much for making the time to be here and connect with me. So today we're going to be talking about prioritizing purpose, a strategic blueprint for value-based DAOs. A little context. So I'm an author of a book called Self-Actualization in the Age of Crisis. It's a nonfiction book that develops new frameworks of meaning and value informed by cosmology and physics. Essentially, the last 5 years of cosmology and physics have told us the universe is not at all like our inherited dogmas. And so to that end, we try and develop a new framework of being, spirituality in some sense, around that. And I make some claims in the book, and this is all relevant, that's why I'm sharing ahead of time. I make an argument that there is in fact a single truth, which is change, because physics and cosmology tell us that the material nature of reality is in fact infinite. We live in one of many sequential universes. There was one before this, and there'll be one after. To that end, the single truth exists in tandem with the relational universe, right? This is nothing new. The idea that all of us inhabit a unique set of conscious coordinates, individuals, but at the same time, we represent a single happening, experiencing itself from a wide variety of perspectives. So to that end, the book says, okay, if this is accurate, who is the ideal individual to thrive in this reality? And we develop a new set of core values. We bind those core values to a systemic project. And the final chapter of the book is titled SpiritDAO. And what I'm going to share today is the last 8 months of journey of working with our community to build SpiritDAO and how to prioritize value-based DAOs. So if you've read on the screen, my background's in the nonprofit organizing philanthropy space. So this is definitely going to be a talk that leans more into that area when I talk about value-based DAOs, but let's dive in to prioritizing purpose. So first, let's talk about what is a value-based DAO, right? We have to start with the obvious. Every DAO is a value-based DAO. That is to say that every interaction in a direction reinforces specific ways of acting, specific ways of thinking, and in turn, over time, accumulates to certain ways of being. So there's implicit value DAOs, right? An implicit value DAO would be an investment DAO, right? We're here for an objective. The objective is not a value, right? Each of us approach that objective with a unique set of values we embody, right? For someone, it might be security. I'm here to be a part of this investment DAO to feed my family. For some others, it might be renown or greed. I want my 5th house, right? So the challenge with implicit value DAOs is that in times of struggle, in times of strife, the objective is a poor social glue, right? It doesn't keep the community cohesive. Explicit value DAOs are DAOs that bind personal protocols to collective action. The idea being that you put forth a set of core values that you want your members to embody, not only inside the DAO, but outside the DAO, and then you do what's necessary to kind of reinforce that. So the argument behind explicit value DAOs, especially in the context of communities, nonprofits, and philanthropic organizations, is that they allow for really scalable, large visions, because the values are what bind the individuals together in that group. They're working towards a higher purpose. It also allows for essentially, I mentioned shared business. Let's also talk about the idea of proactivity. So I want to emphasize from the start, this is very different from, let's say, a traditional C Corp, right, that has a performative value sets. They do this analysis, they see, these are our values. Ultimately, every C Corp is subject to the same core function: extract, accumulate. So any amount of values will always come secondary to those core objectives. An explicit value-based DAO prioritizes the spread and embrace of their values first over, for example, the accumulation. But most importantly about explicit value-based DAOs, and moving forward, when I say value-based DAOs, I'm only talking about explicit, is that their structural character reflects and spreads those values. So not only within the community, right, because there's a proactivity about it, you must be proactive in cultivating them, but also through the protocols and products you build. When people interact with those products, it spreads the values that your community embraces. So we're going to talk about how we went into why, or I should say why we went into this. So the purpose of value-based DAOs, this is originally taken from Kevin Iwaki's talk about public goods attractors, but I think it really strongly applies to value-based DAOs. there's the principal agent problem. A principal is an organization, the DAO, right? The agents are the individuals. Everyone's kind of contributing from their own unique value set and working towards the objective in their own way to kind of meet their own personal needs. The challenge is that there's the conflict of self-interest and mutual interest. My argument is that a value-based DAO closes the gap, and it blurs the line between self-interest and mutual interest. And especially in the framework of communities and nonprofits and philanthropic DAOs, that is the ideal. You want your members to be contributing to your objective because it is their objective. Okay, that the incentives are, that it really blurs the line between moral and material interests. And in a value-based DAO, that's the ideal that we want to shoot for. A high overview of some of the benefits of value-based DAOs in comparison to, let's say, implicit value-based DAOs is the first is authenticity and integrity. Ultimately, if a DAO declares a set of core values and says, look, this is how we're going to operate, this is what we're working towards, members entering that DAO enter with the understanding of that expectation and recognize that other members do the same. So there's a layer of authenticity in those connections that is real, genuine, and shared. The second is sustainability, right? I gave the example of the investment DAO. It reaches some strife, there's some conflict, it's quick to dissipate, right? The first project lost 20% of our investment, I'm out. Whereas a value-based DAO, there's a deeper connection, a deeper purpose for being there that helps to kind of weather the storm. Flexibility. The point of value-based DAOs is to encourage experimentalism, to support experimentalism in the community's direction and let people kind of experiment in their own way to further the shared purposes. Holistic growth. Everything we're going to talk about when we get into the actual blueprint is about prioritizing member alignment over quantity of members, right? So it's kind of a slower approach, but it's more holistic. The people you're getting are more deeply aligned with your vision, and you care more about them, right? It's not just about how much is in the bank account or how many members total do we have. Conflict resolution and arbitration, right? With a shared value set, ultimately, there's a really concrete and pre-agreed upon set of values that we're judging behavior on. So when it comes to arbitration, conflicts can be judged against those values. And then finally, stakeholder creation, right? It goes back to that principal agent problem. The entire purpose of organizing a nonprofit community or philanthropic DAO around a set of core values is the people engaged in those communities are deeply engaged at a point where their mission is both personal and collective. Compared to traditional DAO models, right, fundraising is certainly a struggle. If you're going to build a community or a nonprofit DAO, I strongly recommend against tying governance rights to an ERC20 token, right? Outside of the US, like legal ambiguity, it's just, what it does, it reinforces and really imports traditional hierarchical kind of dominator capitalist values into your kind of collective organization. So if that's how you're beginning your effort, you're going to really struggle to kind of transcend that for a kind of more shared vision. Certainly efficiency can be a challenge, right? With value-based DAOs, experimentalism is central to their operation. And compared to, let's say, a single product DAO where everyone on the team is working on one thing, you might move a little slower. And scalability, right? We do a lot of things that I'm going to share with you at SpiritDAO that are not scalable. Okay, and that's a core kind of component of it, and we do that on purpose, right? That's the ideal because we do a lot of human connection to reinforce our values with the community. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about SpiritDAO. So I mentioned I'm the author of a book about a year ago, actually a year ago to the date, and September 6th, I launched this book at MCon 2. Showed up. Gave a bunch of copies away. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it, right? And it really resonated. But the challenge was we didn't have a call to action. Since then, the SpiritDAO communities come together and translated this 500-page nonfiction book to a 60-page graphic novel. And we brought a bunch for you guys to take. So if you haven't already seen this, they're in that corner near that banner. Please take some before you head out. We serve three core purposes, right? To spread our message, to support our members through physical and virtual utility, and to further the 8 dignities. The 8 dignities are outlined in the books. They are a spiritual systemic project, 8 specific global public works with the intent to kind of remove humanity's reliance on birth lottery as the primary determiner of access and agency, which I argue in the book in depth under the kind of the maximalist kind of capitalist vision is exactly what it does, right? Statistically, if you're born in abject poverty today, you will stay there. So how do we free that kind of latent imagination that's trapped in the world? When we thought about how do we want to align our members, we set some kind of core priorities, right? The first thing we wanted to make sure is everyone who was a part of SpiritDAO understood our philosophy and practice. Why are we doing this? Why are we calling ourselves SpiritDAO? What is the non-religion religion, right? What does that mean? So we wanted to make sure that was kind of all of our members had at least an intermediate knowledge prior to kind of contributing to the DAO. The second was action orientation. Especially with my personal background in organizing and nonprofit work, I felt like there's many people talking about the meta crisis, many brilliant people, right, analyzing the problem over and over and over again. There's very few alternatives. SpiritDAO is an attempt at an alternative, a reorientation of how we think of what is in order to kind of free the present from the influence of the past. Engaged governance, right? It's every DAO's challenge. I'll talk a bit about that, what we did. And then proactive inclusivity, right? All of us are here because we probably share some technical acumen, right? We love Web3, but there's so many people who don't know what they don't know. And part of SpiritDAO's mission is very much casting a wide net. So through the lens of the nonprofit, community, and philanthropic DAO, one of our core goals was, how do we make Web3 an afterthought for the community? How do we build an ecosystem where you could be on Web3 after being onboarded and not even know that you're really there outside of like connecting a wallet? So these are our core values. I won't dive too deeply into them. You can read about the how and why we kind of established them. I make the argument in the book that in a relational universe governed by a single truth of change, these are the ideal values to kind of orient yourself with the nature of what is, to kind of maximize what I argue is divinity in the moment, right? The alignment of the two observable infinities, the universe itself and human imagination. And the orientation of those two in a moment represents divinity. So let's talk about the tech. This is our full kind of tech stack, and I want to talk piece by piece about why we chose these options and what we think about them. So first and foremost, we're on the Optimism chain, and Optimism, just because we thought there was a lot of value alignment, we definitely wanted to be on an L2. Unlock protocol, if you guys are not familiar with Unlock, so what Unlock does is allow for non-transferable, time-bound NFTs. So for us as a nonprofit, right, we're incorporating as a 501c3. The intention is the memberships serve as both a source of reoccurring revenue, but they're also donations for our members, right? And they're highly customizable, and it's really intuitive. Charmverse is where we get work done. I spent a fair amount of time evaluating many different solutions, DAO Lens, Hylia. I was looking for like an all-in-one. Ultimately, I felt they just weren't there, so we kind of had to do this, and Charmverse was like the next best thing. You'll notice if you're familiar with DAOs, like one thing that's missing here is discourse, right, which is a better form than Charmverse is, but for us, it was more important to kind of have a single source of truth for the community. Guild XYZ just used for Discord roles and tokening. We have a pretty robust document section, especially as a nonprofit. We have Snapshot integrates with Charmverse, Telegram, and Discord. And finally, hats. If you guys are not familiar with hats, I know the guys are giving a talk tomorrow. I definitely recommend you go. Hats, just to be candid, was something we were looking for a long time. And it checked a lot of boxes for the nonprofit, community, and philanthropic DAO. I think it really does an exceptional job of allowing small groups to kind of coordinate together. And I'm going to dive more into that. What you're looking at now, this is our actual hatch tree. So you'll look at, we have an onboarding pod, and there's like 3 different keys they get as they go through the phases. Each one unlocks a new one, and then they get that verified member token. So let's move on to our membership. So in alignment with our core values of relation, equity, and flexibility, we wanted to be able to meet prospective members where they are, which meant that we didn't want finances to be a barrier to participation. So we have this multi-tiered membership. You'll see all the way in the left-hand side, we have a proof of curiosity, so we have a free tier. And what that is if they mint that free tier, the NFT lasts for 30 days, and they can do our onboarding, right, in those 30 days. And if they complete the onboarding, they get dropped a free 4-month membership. Okay, the other membership tiers, they have ancillary perks, but I want to be clear, the membership tiers do not impact governance. So if you buy the higher membership tier, you don't get more say in the vote. Okay, we wanted to put that out there from the start. This is our onboarding process. This is essentially taken directly from Sam Marin's 3C model. We have a 3-stage onboarding process. We use Bonfire, all right? I don't know if I mentioned it. Bonfire is a token-gated video platform. So essentially what you do is you upload content. Our onboarding is a combination of self-guided learning and then community connection in each phase. So phase 1, you do the self-guided learning, you connect. Bonfire allows us to token gate the learning, so you have to have that proof of curiosity NFT or any other membership. But then it also allows us to verify. I can see which wallet watched how many minutes of the video, right? So we can actually verify that they're doing the onboarding. And then from there, the first 2 phases are the same thing: self-guided learning, human connection. The third phase is just a human connection and then signing off on our core agreements and a statement of intent, our network agreement, assigning roles with hats, like giving them where they want to work and kind of opening up the access to those aspects. And then they become a verified member of SpiritDAO. Now, earlier I talked about prioritizing active governance. So at SpiritDAO, we believe that governance is both a privilege and a responsibility. So the way we give voting rights is through the verification process. We ask the same thing of every prospective member: 3.5 hours, 4.5 if you do the optional content, right? So either way, when they go through this, that's how they gain right to governance within the community. Pods and grouping reflects our core values of flexibility, minimalism, right? We want to let people work how they want to work. And if you're not familiar with pods, I'll be real brief with it. Basically, and we use hats for this, it supports small groups. They spin up a separate multi-sig for the project. Some pods are permanent, like our onboarding pod is a permanent staple of SpiritDAO. But you could imagine if we were doing an event, we might spin up a pod specifically for that event. Issue the hats tokens, okay? We can have them expire after the fact. We can revoke them. They get a separate multi-sig, which the primary DAO distributes funds to. They do what they need to do, and then towards the end, they dissolve that pod or keep it, whatever the case may be. We're experimenting with weighted voting in alignment with our core values of equity, of flexibility, and also enthusiasm and courage. We want people to participate. So this is purely experimental. I have to be candid, this is not set in stone right now. Our current thinking is that for the primary DAO votes, like the collective DAO, it's 1 member, 1 vote. But for pod voting, the directions that you're contributing to, so if I'm a dev in the dev pod and I'm working over time, I gain stronger voting rights in that pod. And I gain stronger voting rights over time, which again, HAT supports and then integrates with snapshots. This is what's so exciting about this is we're finally at a space where it's really easy to do. So this is kind of an experimental model of what it might look like. And basically, that kind of wraps it up. I mean, ultimately, what I feel about the explicit value-based DAO and what's really exciting about it is it provides an opportunity to genuinely scale impact and align people who might otherwise never be in this space, and align them in a way that allows for maximum flexibility to reinforce core values. I gave you a specific set of core values that we embody, but ultimately your community or your philanthropic or nonprofit venture could do their own. But to kind of reinforce that. I think I have a little bit of extra time, so I'm just going to throw some extra slides real quick. This is our operational map. So this is how we're organizing ourselves and how we're organizing both the capital inflows, the efforts that where we put our capital to create value and how that value returns to our community. We're experimenting with communal AI. So I've trained 2 models. One on the book itself, that's front-facing. So if you go to the book's website, you can just interact with it and ask the questions. Then we have an internal model. It's trained on the book, but the idea is we're developing a knowledge pod where we add specific things that kind of align with our philosophies and practice and allow our community to kind of interact. More importantly, one fun fact about how I've set up the model is not only does it track inputs, but it tracks the time. It timestamps that. So we can actually graph community feelings, not only in a direction, but a temporal aspect. When were they saying these things? Is there any correlation, and can we make that? And the ideal is, again, we're still in our infancy, but the ideal is we'll set up separate agents to analyze that data over time. The book, I didn't mention this, but I should. The day I published the book, I gave it to SpiritDAO. So 100% of all the revenues of the book from day one have funded the DAO. So the intent is, part of the necessity of the reimagining spirituality and kind of linking it to systems in a systemic project is that all of us have kind of inherited these systems that are static, right? They struggle to change. And my argument is that spirituality should evolve alongside its practitioners. So the entire point is this DAO stewards the book, in addition to any kind of permutations it makes, like the graphic novel. And we're working with a self token, so I'll just real briefly about that. Self is completely time-bound. You only get it for the contribution, so like attending a meeting or doing some work, right? It's in addition. But the idea is you can't buy it. It's redeemable like for internal community artifacts, non-transferable and exclusive. So that essentially wraps it up. This is kind of where we're at. I'll open the space for questions. I blazed through this way quicker than I practiced it, so I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I'll open the floor. Any questions? Anyone have anything that I mentioned you want me to dive deeper into?
And we do have a microphone, so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much. Please make sure you grab a graphic novel on the way out. I really appreciate it.